This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest, the host and creator of the Best Picture cast. You know him from episodes like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Lost in Translation, Gran Torino, Stalag 17, Shane, A Fistful of Dollars, and our revisit of the best years of our lives. Please welcome Kieran B.
Look at that. Look at that in-house resume building over here. Yes, I'm back in the Gmote studios. I consider my, little podcasting timeshare vacation house over here. So glad to be back for a holiday-esque version of this and to talk about one of my favorite movies, but I guess we'll get to that.
Well, I don't think you're going to find any strangers here. This has clearly been advertised as one of my favorites as well. So we look forward to, of course, having you back. I can't even remember the count. It's got to be like 8 or 9. You're getting pretty close to the t-shirt.
Getting up there.
It's a nice
You'll be
t-shirt.
the first non-family member to have a t-shirt.
Wow, look at that. And I can now be Dick in t-shirt, so.
Well, even my wife does not have a t-shirt. She decided she didn't want a t-shirt, so she went and made herself a polo shirt.
Well, that's pretty nice, too.
The only one of its kind, so. But I guess, if you're paying for stuff, you might as well.
She lets me spend whatever I want.
All right, let's bring in our other guest. We also welcome our newest celebrity guest, host and creator of Shea Cinema. Please welcome Sara Shea.
I feel like I'm walking up to bat. That was rad. That's definitely how I want my name to be called over the loudspeakers. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Now that you say it, we almost should have like the walk-up music. We should let guests pick their own stuff, as long as it's not too vulgar.
No, just like 5 seconds of awesome. That would be really great. How many times do you have to appear on Gmote to get like a Gmote tattoo?
Ooh, never thought about that.
Dana's got to be approaching that.
One that we pay for? That's a good question. I know there are some people that want us to do the butthole popcorn bucket for 15.
I'm out on that.
No
thanks.
I think the tumbler set, or I've been still pushing for the personalized clapperboard. I think are much better ideas, but to each their own.
Okay.
I'm pushing for the tumbler set.
So, Sara, unfortunately, with all new guests to the show, we like to ask a few questions to allow the audience to get to know you. So First up, tell us about yourself, what you do, and why you love movies.
So I'm Sara. I am actually a high school English teacher. Yay. And that's what I do during the day. The rest of my time is spent thinking about movies. Why do I love movies? How could you not love movies? But my actual first earliest memory is of actually going to the movie theater to see E.T. when I was 3 years old. And it was a highly, highly traumatizing experience. It's still to this day the scariest movie I have ever seen. It is a horror movie. But I know it inside and out, and it's actually a fantastic film. Thank you, Spielberg. But I cannot look at E.T. to this day. Despite that horrifying initial film experience, it's just kind of permeated my entire life. My parents would get me out of bed to watch movies on TV like The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars and things like that. This is back before we had streaming and cable and all of that type of stuff. And so when VCRs were invented, this was a huge, big deal. We got our first VCR when my dad turned 40 and I was like 9 years old. And then it just became an obsession of going to literally the video store in my town was called the video store. And every day was new movies to watch and nothing was off limits. So from a super young age, it was just like, that's what I was consuming with my entire family. And yeah. So when you go from like scanning the newspaper for like, I want to know every review about every movie that's ever been out. I was like more of a cinephile when I was 12 because I knew everything that was in theaters, and we would go to the movies together all the time because it cost $1 to go to the movies. So yeah, I don't know.
The good old days.
The good old days. Yep.
So we got it. No lumpy aliens for you. Okay.
No.
So then the obvious second question, which everybody hates, what is your favorite movie and why?
So you actually had a guest on, was it just last week? We talked about, here's my favorite movie for right now. And I think that's actually a pretty good way to approach it. My favorite movie changes a lot, but then I thought, what would my daughter answer for me? And she would scream out, it's Jaws. There's no other answer. And so Steven Spielberg, E.T., scariest movie ever made. But he also made my favorite movie, which is Jaws. And that's for me what I consider to be like my comfort movie. I will turn it on at any time if I'm feeling sick. So just last week I wasn't feeling well, and literally my kid laid me down on the couch and said, let me put on Jaws for you. It's all going to be okay. And I fell asleep like that. But there's so much fun to be had in that movie. I think it might be a perfect movie, but part of what I love are the little moments in that movie, which I think Spielberg is a master at. Roy Scheider with his son when they're sitting at the table, folding their hands and making faces at each other. I think the character building is really fun. It, of course, is a monster movie, which is my definite thing. And so I think I would be hard pressed to say that there's a movie that I put on more often than that one. Maybe Singing in the Rain, but comfort movie. When we're talking about rewatchability, that's, do you put it on to like make yourself feel better? Jaws is it for me, for sure.
A worthy entry. It had been our number one film on the greatest movie of all time list for at least multiple years, and it may be upcoming again as we revisit it next year.
Okay. I know that I'm heavily biased, but
well, our last guest on the revisit was also heavily biased. That's part of the reason it got up to number one. But
I'm sure.
Even so, I actually think there was a really good dialogue in that one, for it being season 2, on what exactly constitutes a horror film. So if anyone's interested in our thoughts on what exactly is a horror film, and our guest had a very impassioned argument as to why Jaws is a horror film and not a thriller, I think you should go take a listen to that one. And if you want my great, as I've been told, monologue of the USS Indianapolis, you have to check out the first Jaws episode all the way back in season 1. Final question. What makes a good movie for you?
Yeah, so I think that the best way to sum this up for me is the movie entertaining, right? But does it also make me have an emotional connection in some way? There's lots of different reasons to like lots of different movies, and not every movie is going to get the same type of reaction, right? So I like Jaws for one reason, and then I like Singing in the Rain for another reason entirely. And I like this movie, 12 Angry Men, for other reasons also. And so when I get beyond, was I entertained, whether it was in a positive manner or even like in a heart-wrenching manner, what goes beyond that? And so I really look for, was I able to have an emotional reaction of some kind, even if it was something that made me feel uncomfortable or out of sorts or incredibly sad or devastated. So that's really what I look for in whether or not a movie is quote unquote good. These things are so subjective, and I am just myself with my personal experiences, and knowing that not even the person sitting next to me watching the same movie with me at the same time is going to have the same reaction, right? So is it able to elicit some sort of emotional response, either positive or negative.
So what was your emotional response to Skippy?
Did you listen to the episode? Because Skippy
did.
made me cry. Skippy made me cry a lot.
Good old Skippy.
And I was not expecting it. I was expecting to go into it laughing and rolling my eyes a little bit, but there was way more emotional heft in that film than I was prepared for at all. I didn't cry over the dog, but I did cry over Skippy's relationship with his crummy father. And yeah, so it's weird the things that will affect me. And I think that's what I love about movies, is that I can in unexpected ways be like, this movie about a comic strip kid is making me want to bawl my eyes out, right?
For context sake, have you done an episode on Skippy already? Your personal one?
Yeah.
Okay, you've done one, so find an episode for you over there. And Kieran, which in the feed month was it on? I forget. Was it like April?
Yes, on the feed. We actually had Sara on as a guest, so
yeah,
we got to get her take on everything, and got to see if we could let Joey R cool the jets a little bit on his attack on poor Skippy. That would have been, when did you come on, Sara? Was that April?
I think that was April.
Yeah, I think it was on the feed in April.
Just done it.
Yeah, for the listener, we do a monthly kind of news section where we basically address current events and in-house and out, and that Skippy made his way to that on the feed. So we'll have our July one out in a couple weeks.
Talking about Skippy with Kieran and Joey was super, super fun. And I was fully prepared for both of them to say that Skippy was terrible and they hated it, and Skippy staying on the list and all of that type of stuff, because I think it's kind of a curated appeal. But they actually gave it a chance. And I think, Kieran, you actually genuinely enjoyed it. And Joey was like, I'm never going to watch it again. But it wasn't terrible.
I own the DVD now, so I have it in my possession. So whether I like it or not.
Yeah, it's actually a super cute movie. I would recommend it.
All right. So let's turn our focus finally to 12 Angry Men. Tonight, for our 218th episode, we discuss or revisit the all-time classic legal drama 12 Angry Men from 1957. Directed by Sidney Lumet, written by Reginald Rose, music by Kenyon Hopkins, cinematography by Boris Kaufman. Starring Henry Fonda as juror number 8. Martin Balsam as juror number 1, John Fiedler as juror number 2, Lee J. Cobb as juror 3, E.G. Marshall as juror 4, Jack Klugman as juror 5, Edward Binns as juror 6, Jack Warden as juror 7, Joseph Sweeney as juror 9, Ed Bagley as juror 10, George Voskovec as juror 11, and Robert Weber as juror 12. Recognition for this movie? 12 Angry Men was released on April 10th, 1957. It was met with widespread critical acclaim, but had only a moderate box office. It would not find a wider audience until it hit TV audiences a few years later. It was nominated for Best Picture, Director for Lumet, and Adapted Screenplay for Rose. Currently, it holds the distinction of being the highest-rated legal drama on Rotten Tomatoes. In 2011, the film was one of the top 20 most screened films in secondary schools in the United Kingdom. I would guess that it's also pretty high up on the list in the United States. The film has been remade and readapted many times, including in 1997 by William Friedkin. It has also been remade in Germany, Russia, China, and South Korea. I don't know why Russia and China would be participating in a movie like this about the American legal system, or any legal system that is not a dictatorship, but
I've actually seen the Russian one, believe it or not. It's bizarre. They like cut away from the courthouse and go to like flashes to each of their lives and stuff. It's real wacky. I think it's called 12 in Russian, but
okay.
There you go.
I'm not even really sure how to respond to that. But
no,
okay.
it's like Lost, where they like do like flashbacks and forwards for the jurors,
Okay, well,
yeah.
I mean, you are the resident Lost expert on this particular episode.
Hell yeah. Proud to be that.
Sometime I might have to watch an episode of that.
You've never seen an episode of Lost?
Neither
Never.
of us have.
Watch the pilot
Start with
and
the
then
pilot.
make a decision. It's so good. I didn't know you were a Lost fan, Kieran. Just more to
Big
like about
time.
you every day.
Big defender. I defend all seasons. I defend all seasons.
Excellent. Excellent.
12 Angry Men has since been recognized by the AFI on the following list. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills at number 88. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, with Juror number 8 as the number 28 hero. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Cheers at number 42. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th Anniversary Edition at number 87. And AFI's 10 Top 10 as the number 2 courtroom drama. Do you remember which film was slightly ahead of it? If you listen to the original episode, you already know this answer.
Take it.
It's To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes. 12 Angry Men currently holds a 100% rating among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 97 score on Metacritic, and a 4.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, Dad, as we start each week, what is your relationship to this film?
This is a film I don't think I watched until I was probably in my 40s. And I think we've watched it almost every year or twice a year ever since.
Yeah, this is pretty close to comfort food. It's not like the first film that occurs to me to like put on. It's not a guilty pleasure film like certain ones that if I see it on Netflix, I'm probably turning it on. But it's pretty damn close. It's widely available. It's usually on like Tubi or Pluto or something else because the rights to this have evolved and it's pretty well just available constantly. It's on TeepCM all the time. And I can't say the first time that I watched it, but I'm pretty familiar with this backwards and forwards. I can probably watch this on a loop if I really wanted to. It's just been a part of my life for the last 30 some years.
I was actually first introduced to 12 Angry Men through the William Friedkin version. I was in middle school when it had come out in 97. I was in 7th grade and it was on Showtime and I knew nothing about it, just sat down and was just absolutely sucked in as to, whoa, what is going on here? And as far as I knew, that was the only version of it. I, would later learn that it was in a film from the 50s. So I don't think I actually saw the 50s version until I went to college and then was like, oh, why haven't I been watching this one all along? Not that the William Friedkin one is bad in any way. It's actually really fun to see the guest cast that they have there. And with a little bit more diversity as far as race goes, it's still 12 men, but they add the diversity in the race. And like you said, Tom, just kind of something I could have on loop. I've seen countless number of times. This time around, I got the Criterion version here, which includes the original television version that aired on the anthology. So I watched that for this. That was fun. It's about 50 minutes. And I also rewatched the William Friedkin one. So I have all sorts of 12 Angry Men, and it's so the original television is like an hour of television with commercials. So it's 50 minutes, give or take a little. And then the obviously the original is 90 minutes, and then the William Friedkin version is almost 2 hours. I think it's like 145, 150. So they add some interactions and whatnot. So I might get a little lost as to what what is in the original one and what's not here. But I got a lot of 12 Angry Men content leading up to this. Of course,
that's like
your original episode too, which was great.
That's like 36 Angry Men.
It's 36 Angry Men. It is. Yes, with the alternate jurors too.
Is that a kinescope recording of that from the early 50s?
It might be. It was on like an anthology television show. Dana, you might know more about it than me, but they would, I guess each episode would be about something completely different, and this one just happened to be about a group of jurors. It was directed by Schaffner, who directed Planet of the Apes and Patton. He I guess directed the whole series, and this was one of the ones there. So Franchot Tone plays the Lee J. Cobb version, which is kind of cool. Franchot Tone from Beauty and the Bounty. So the others I didn't really recognize, but
so no matter how hard I try, I always am underprepared comparative to Kieran every time he seems to come on. And now, as much as I challenge the Revisionist Almanac when I go on there to try and over-prepare for Andrew's show, I am the least prepared person on my own frickin' show.
It's not fair, Tom. You have to do one of these a week. I do it out of reverence to the brand here. I'm not trying to one up anybody here. I like to bring as much as I can to the occasion.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel much better. All right, Sarah, what's your relationship to it?
Yeah, so this is one of those movies that I saw really early on once we had a VCR and it was available to watch on VHS. So as we're getting older, right, my years with it are starting to outweigh my years without it. So I think I've pretty much always known about this film. I do remember watching it and being so easily sucked in, even as like an 11-year-old, that it was really easy to follow along and feel emotionally connected to what was going on, even if I still to this day have a hard time knowing what the juror numbers are. But recognizing the different character types and the challenges that they're facing in terms of being effective communicators or completely miscommunicating and misunderstanding one another. So I feel like, yeah, I've always known this movie. My own father being an attorney obviously plays into that as well. So it was like the first time that we watched it, we had lots and lots of discussions about what does this actually mean and what are they searching for, all of those types of things. I've also seen the William Friedkin version, which I think I saw most recently about 6 months ago, and it is actually really, really good. They're two completely different things, and it's like seeing different stage productions of a play, essentially, and you can enjoy one more than the other or not, but I don't think that there's any sort of neither one diminishes the other, if that makes any sort of sense. I understand why people get frustrated with remakes, but the anger over remakes, I think, is a really recent phenomenon. Movies were remade over and over and over again in early Hollywood. Like, you have 6 versions of the same story, people just being like, this is so great, why don't we just redo it and see what we come up with? And I think it's really fun to see Jack Lemmon and I said this before, General Patton go at it and fight each other in the jury room, but they did do some of those diversity changes, which doesn't distract from the overall message of the story at all. So this movie, as I said before we even started, I love this movie. I have lots and lots of nitpicks about it, but it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the film, even if I'm like, I don't like this, and this. So
no, I think the nitpicks are out of love, as opposed to like, I have a problem with this movie.
Right.
And just to tie in to last week's episode on Forrest Gump, Michael T. Williamson plays the Ed Begley character, and he does a killer job. He's awesome in it. So that's Bubba Gump last week, and this week he's juror number. I also have trouble with movie math. But juror number, I guess 9, maybe 10, maybe juror number 10.
Juror Ed Begley.
10.
Yeah, 10. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I don't struggle as much with the juror numbers, given that I remember the seat position of every single character in this. But that's from having seen the movie probably about 40 times by this point. I just have this like categorical memorization of, okay, well, if Martin Balsam's in the first chair, John Fiedler's in the second, Lee J. Cobb's in the third, E.G. Marshall's got to be fourth. Okay, Klugman, yep, Binns, Warden. All right, then there's Fonda bringing up around the corner, Sweeney. Then you got to have, Begley's. Oh, yeah, Begley's 10. Then 11 is the guy whose name I can't always remember because it's probably
Robert
Greek.
Weber.
No, that's 12.
Weber's 12. Yeah.
Oh,
George
Georgia.
It's like Vuskovic or something.
Vukovic.
He was in the original TV version.
Yeah, him and the old man were the two from that reprised the roles. Everyone else.
I'm so jealous that you saw that. That's so great. I gotta buy a DVD. Dang it.
Yeah, it's on the Criterion. I'm sure you could probably find it somewhere on YouTube or something too. But
well, I wonder, since Criterion is a streaming service and they sometimes have all that are included like bonus features, if it's maybe one of those that's included on the streaming version. But
probably is.
Curious. Yeah. Either way, what is this movie about?
Isn't it just about how people talk about movies? I was literally thinking this yesterday on my like fourth or fifth watch that yes, it's more than this, but this is how we discuss movies, right? Everybody comes to these things with their different perspectives, their personal lives, their different buy-ins and viewpoints on things, and trying to, again, communicate effectively with each other or not. It's the same conversation that we're all having week after week after week after week based on movies, but now you've just made it exponentially larger with a whole bunch of different people in a room. It's not about movies, but you know what I mean.
Very cool.
No, but I think it can be applied to any sort of argument or debate.
Yeah.
And especially with us in a certain legal culture that we've defined for ourselves, especially with the proliferation of legal drama shows as we've gone on, especially since the original advent of like Law and Order has really increased the number of them. And obviously, Dad is familiar with the legal shows well before about 1990 with Dragnet and some of those other things. But the large upscale with Law and Order and such after that, I think all of us have a ingrained sense of what the justice system is. And this is the idealistic version of how the justice system, quote unquote, should work.
I mean, you guys really put it pretty wonderfully in your first episode. So just to try to expand on it, for me, this is about speaking your point of view, despite being outnumbered amidst popular opinion. And it's doing so in a very high stakes zone. And, there was a lot of talk in the first episode. I'm sure there'll be more today about how kind of unrealistic and how this isn't how real life works. But two movies that are two of my favorites that I think are a little kind of more obviously allegorical. The Shawshank Redemption, which when my first episode I came on and said was my number one favorite movie of all time. And two would be Slumdog Millionaire. And people always say with Slumdog Millionaire, oh, come on, how does he know every single question exactly the right way and they all line up with his life? That's impossible. It would never happen. Well, this is an allegory as to how hard it is to find someone and connect with someone you love, that it's not something you can just do a standardized test on. You have to have been in the right place at the right time and experience the right thing to truly connect with the person you love. And it's done through a bizarre game show. But I think that there's a lot of that to this movie too. Like, how could all of those things one by one have happened that coincidentally to put this guy in this situation? But in this world, in this allegory, it did. And here is someone who's willing to, not just someone who's willing to step up and speak against it and say, I don't care how obvious this seems to the 11 of you, there's something to be said here. But the second guy, when they do the close ballot, which is my favorite scene of the movie, to say, I'm going to give this guy a chance, and I'm going to be number two that does it. Because if he doesn't, they're going back with the guilty. Henry Fonda is tipping his cap. So I love that sense, that allegorical sense of this film.
Yeah, and I think that what that is that it really is an exercise in critical thinking, right? I just want to talk. He keeps saying over and over, what is there to talk about? Well, I don't know. I mean, he explains pretty explicitly over and over again, there's more to this than us just making a snap decision, right? I want things to be this accurate down to the second when someone's life is on the line. So why aren't we having a conversation about this? And it's not necessarily even for me as a viewer that he needs to win everybody over, but because people are willing to listen long enough to start to have, because really, and this is one of my nitpicks, the shadow of a doubt, right? If there's any shadow of a doubt, then you probably shouldn't be saying that this kid is guilty. Let's put to the side that they really should be talking about whether or not this was premeditated murder and not whether or not he actually committed the crime, right? But that asking to have the conversation and asking for people to listen for just long enough so that I can present something that's opposite to what you're thinking, or maybe even just adjacent to what you're thinking, I think is what's really powerful about the film.
Let's let the only lawyer in the room weigh in.
It's in part an expose of how people's experiences, beliefs, and prejudices ultimately impact democracy. And
I would
it
100%
comes
agree
out
with that,
in
yeah.
that basis. Okay. It's one of the reasons why, as a trial lawyer, and I had voir dire, I would always ask the jurors, how many people read a morning or a daily newspaper? And I would also ask, how many people in the jury are managers or who supervise other people? And if I had a bad case, I would get rid of those people as quickly as I possibly could, because I didn't want Henry Fonda pushing everybody to convict. I wanted 12 jurors who were passive and not knowing what to do, who would be intimidated by the whole process, and you would have a chance of them coming up with some weird verdict that would acquit the client. That's tip from Dana, number 7.
So all of you current or future lawyers. So in our original episode, I likened this to an episode of The West Wing because it has such idealism for a process that I think most people underappreciate. Is this, though, too idealistic, too naive, too much about a jury that would never act in this manner?
To me, it's not, because it's a story. It's a tale. It's, as I said before, it works in an allegorical sense. It's they're storytelling through an extreme to get a point across, and to let the characters kind of play each of their ingredients into the pot there. So to me, doing that kind of hyperbolic storytelling doesn't always work for me. But when you get it right, you get some of the best stuff out there. And for me, this is one of those examples.
Yeah, I don't think that this movie is too earnest and naive. If it was too earnest and naive, they would all go in there and every single one of them would have some sort of crisis of conscience on their own, right? Because that would be the ideal, that nobody would want to convict someone wrongly. When it comes down to it, right? And you had mentioned this in your original episode as well, that the concern of letting a guilty man go free outweighs the concern of convicting someone who is not guilty. And that in an ideal situation, everybody would feel super sensitive about it and not just be ready to go. One of the things that I've learned through doing early cinema and history timelines and stuff is being shocked at how quickly there would be arrests, convictions, and executions, especially in the early 30s. Sometimes it would be a matter of months through that whole entire process from arrest to execution. And did those people get fair trials? I don't know. I wasn't there, but it feels a little bit like perhaps not, just because of how quickly things went. I do know that Sidney Lumet was really interested in doing a movie on the Sacco and Vanzetti case. That was such a huge deal, and they essentially were like, no, we can't do this. It's going to be too controversial, because the suggestion that he was going for was maybe they were convicted and executed when they shouldn't have been. So I think when it comes down to the basic conceit of the film, are we going to just convict this kid like that and he's going to the chair? Because that's it. That's the instructions that they are told immediately at the beginning, is there isn't going to be any mercy. If you find him guilty, it's done. He's being executed. So even though it's 1957, how quickly could that have been? And so idealism would come into play, that everybody would be like really bothered by that, and they're not, which is the concerning part, right?
I think I'd come down in about the same range as Kieran, that it is a story, but it's in a story with a purpose. If we didn't have an idealistic example, what would be the point of something like Plato's Republic? That's giving us an outline or something to strive for, not that it's necessarily realistic. And while this movie gives us a kind of picture of a jury that how they would almost never act, that doesn't mean that this isn't a good civics lesson in how it should act.
Yeah, at least in terms of asking questions and stuff like that.
It's
right?
the ideal. It's what everyone hopes a jury does. Okay.
Well, at least defense attorneys.
Well, I always said, people would ask me when I did criminal defense whether I ever felt bad about defending guilty people. And I'm like, I never represented anybody who was guilty. That was the job of the judge and the jury to determine. I'm just going to do my job. And if I do my job and the judge does his job and the prosecutor does her job and the jury does their job, then everything should go according to the way it should. And you do the best job you can, but it's the ideal. Okay. I've been on both sides. I've had 2 fairly hung juries, no mistrials for hung juries, but both times in Wisconsin, it's a state decision, Allen versus Wisconsin, where there's an instruction you have to give, which tells them you have to make a decision. You have to come to a conclusion, which is the death knell of the person holding out. And I've also had a jury that was out for 22 minutes. Now, it was an acquittal, but it was only 22 minutes. You can't even pick a juror and use the bathroom in 22 minutes, or a jury foreman in a bathroom in 22 minutes. But they came back with an acquittal. So this is the ideal, and it's what you strive for and hope that it happens.
So, Dad, do you want to give us a little bit more on the movie? Do you have a plot summary ready for us?
Yes. 12 Angry Men is a masterclass in cinematic storytelling. A film that transcends its simple setting to explore the complexities of human nature and the intricacies of the American justice system. Directed by Sidney Lumet, this 1957 classic features a powerhouse performance by Henry Fonda, leading an ensemble cast through a tense, emotionally charged jury deliberation. The plot revolves around 12 jurors tasked with deciding the fate of a young man accused of murder. As the film unfolds entirely within the confines of a single jury room, the characters' personal biases, prejudices, and moral dilemmas come to the forefront. Fonda's juror number 8 stands as the lone voice of doubt against an initial consensus of guilt, gradually dismantling the case piece by piece through a logical reasoning and relentless questioning. 12 Angry Men remains a timeless reflection on justice, democracy, and the power of reasonable doubt. It's a film that challenges viewers to look beyond the surface and question the assumptions that underpin their beliefs. This is not just a courtroom drama. It is an enduring examination of the moral and ethical struggles that define us all.
Thank you. All right, we did not have the Did You Know section on the original episode, so this is going to be new. I got to play around a little bit. Did you know? Director Sidney Lumet had the actors all stay in the same room for several hours on end and do their lines over and over without filming them. This was to give them a real taste of what it would be like to be cooped up in a room with the same people. Did you know? Because the painstaking rehearsals for the film lasted an exhausting 2 weeks, filming had to be completed in an unprecedented 21 days. Did you know? This film is commonly used in business schools and workshops to illustrate team dynamics and conflict resolution techniques. Did you know? Because of the demands of the film's low budget, if the lighting was set up for a shot that took place from one particular angle, all the shots from that same angle had to be filmed then and there. This meant that different sides of the same conversation were sometimes shot several weeks apart. Did you know? Many of the shots of the actors were filmed on their own and then edited together. This required the sound of the rain to be recorded separately for each actor. Did you know? Henry Fonda hired Sidney Lumet to direct because he had extensive experience in television and had a reputation for staying on schedule and within budget. And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 219th episode, we welcome back returning guest Jesse Sertle of Cinemadison to discuss the film that started the counterculture of the new Hollywood for its 55th anniversary, Easy Rider from 1969. Directed and written by Dennis Hopper, with Peter Fonda and Terry Southern, starring Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, and Jack Nicholson. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you.
That's REELGOOD.
Before we jump back into the full episode here, this is normally our new segment for Ask Dana Anything. And we do have one of our guests with multiple Ask Dana Anything questions. So I give the floor over to our new celebrity guest, Sara.
Okay, Dana, I have several questions for you. I asked my own father these questions while recording our season 5 finale last week. Tom, I'd also be interested in your responses to these questions as well. But Dana, what have you enjoyed most about doing this podcast with your son, since you've been doing it for so many years now?
Well, it's primarily it's an outlet to be creative and to do something outside of my legal practice, especially at a time when I was trying to back off and start reducing my hours. I had put in 65, 70 hours for 20 years and had just gotten to the point where I was physically and mentally drained. This gives me something to look forward to, and it gives him and I something to bond over, which we've always bonded over films, which that was the one thing I bonded over my father with, which was films. And so we've kind of made this a 3-generational tie. In some ways, I regret that my father didn't live long enough to see or hear the podcast and see the love that his grandson now has for film. But those are the kinds of things I think would be the primary ones.
I guess if I'm going to answer the same question, part of the reason to start this in the first place, even though we'd been talking about it for a few years before we actually got to do it, and we recorded some sports pilot thing that never really went anywhere. It was really poor quality, probably in 2018, 2017, somewhere in there. And I just scrapped it. But when I was first leaving the firm from a full-time position, right around the beginning of the pandemic, right before we were going to create this, I felt, because I had listened to the national radio host, Dan Le Batard, talk about how working with his dad meant so much to him. And we'd been working together full time for about 7 years at that point. I wanted just something that we could stay working on together with. And so this was a good outlet. It was going to be a hobby. It coincided with kind of one of the worst periods in just human history recently. So, I mean, it gave us some clarity on all of that. But if there's really one thing outside of just staying connected to my dad and having this camaraderie and working with him on it, is I love how much it means to him that we do the show.
Very cool. Very cool. And I just want to throw in, too, in your original 12 Angry Men episode, you guys flirted a segment of, what would Ron Duncan think of this movie? I think you should bring that back. Just a little one-liner.
Yeah, it was going to be 3-word reviews. My grandfather could not give you more than 4 or 5 words at a time. And I think even the review that I gave was 4 words, if I remember right.
Well, I think 4 words was about it, because we would sit and watch. We'd go over to my parents sometimes on Sundays when we were close by, and we'd watch the Packer games together. My mother and wife would go do something, right? Shop or whatever. And the game would be done. We'd be ready to go home. And she'd say, well, what did your dad have to say? Nothing. You mean you were there for 3 hours and you didn't say anything? He says, yeah, we had a long conversation. He said, where the hell was he throwing that to? And you ever see such bullshit calls? And that was about the extent of our conversations for 3 hours.
I will say, the longest conversation I had with my grandfather probably went like this. Hey, Tom, Grandpa's on the phone. You want to say hi? Sure. Hi, Grandpa. Hi. How are things? Fine. Are things going well in Beloit? Yeah. Okay. Take care. Yeah. Okay. That was my grandfather. He just, well, I can't say I blame him given how many homes he was in when he was a small child.
Yeah, I think we figured out there was like 53 homes between birth and 17.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So emotionally stunted. There it is. But, all right, what do you got for question 2 here?
Okay, Dana. Kind of offshoot of that first question, what have you learned about yourself through doing this podcast?
I guess I have always had a problem with persistency in some things. And so having Tom there to rely on has helped me be more persistent and consistent. I've always been a really good ideas guy. I come up with a lot of great ideas. I just need to find people around me to execute them because my follow through is not always the greatest. And this podcast only emphasizes that in my mind, that it's one of the key factors in success in life is to understand your limitations and try to fill those with people around you who can handle it.
I would say from a podcasting standpoint, one, knowing my limitations. There was a time where I was doing one full-time job, one part-time job, and releasing 3 podcast episodes a week. Now, that was during the pandemic when I was only talking to people through podcasting, but I got burned out rather quickly over doing that for about 2-ish years. So that was not something I need to go back to. I would say that I've enjoyed the technical aspect of things. Editing has always been something that comes a little bit more naturally to me. Critiquing and criticizing things has always been, I guess, my bread and butter, my go-to, my comfort zone, if you will, as opposed to always being the participant. And I also realize my limitations with networking. I am terrible at selling myself.
Which is probably going back to one of our previous Ask Dana Anything questions, why you're still single.
No disagreement here.
Being not single is very overrated. I've been married twice. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Okay, more questions. Dana, looking back on your life, what job or career would you choose if you couldn't be a lawyer?
Oh, easy. The job I really wanted to do, but couldn't figure out how to pay for anything with it. I wanted to be a college professor. I wanted to teach history.
Excellent. Any particular focus in history or just all
I've always been a closet military historian. When I was in grade school, they came out with these magazines called the World at War, and it was all in Second World War. And my allowance was 50 cents and the magazines were 50 cents. So every week I would go and plunk down my money to buy the magazines. And I would carry this big stack of magazines to school to read during recess. And so I've always been a military historian, World War II. Later on, I got involved in the Civil War history. And anything history and presidential has just been a big fascination for me. I've been off and on working on a book on a military war or a war that nobody really understands or thinks about, which is the Philippine-American War from the turn of the 20th century, where tens of thousands of Filipinos and Americans died in a conflict to justify our imperialism, our control of the Philippines at that time. And it's a really fascinating story, and I hope someday I'll actually have time to finish the book.
All right. And so then, Tom, I don't know if you want to answer that question.
I can answer that question. I just don't know how interested everybody is in what my alternative career would be.
Yeah, I actually am.
Okay. Well, I've said for a while, and I usually answer this question on the basis of if you had $100 million or basically unlimited resources, what would you spend your time doing? I would be a film studio head. I would want to greenlight projects. I've had this idea for a while where if I ever had the level of resources of like unlimited wealth, Bezos level money, I would just hire a team of directors and writers, kind of similar to studio system style, but where it's much more in the creative process of how something is made beforehand, as opposed to let's get a bunch of actors together and then find the project for them. I'd want the writing and the directing to lead the way as opposed to the other way around. And then I would use that as a launching pad to do more long form interview podcasting where I could just talk to friends of mine from the industry.
Kieran, what job would you want if you couldn't be a lawyer?
Well, my dad's a lawyer, so I know that I don't necessarily want to do that. No, hey, listen, I get to coach baseball, I get to run a bar, I get to podcast. I'm pretty happy. I don't have any other alternate plans. Maybe if it was something like having $100 million, I'd probably maybe fund all those projects on a larger scale. But I'm doing just fine where I'm at. I'm good.
Okay, then I have one final question. Now, accurate or not, Dana, who would you want to play you in the movie of your life? It could be any actor from any time. It could be someone, who looks like you or not. You could choose different actors to play you at different ages. My brother, we used to joke about, if we were to do a movie of his life, that before he joined the army, he would be played by Dave Attell. And then when he became an Army Ranger, he would be Vin Diesel. But of course, this was the early 2000s at the time. So, whichever you think.
Boy, the one thought crossed my mind, which would have been, but he's older than me too, was Stanley Tucci, because he has this knack for being jovial and yet also very serious and discerning. Most people look at me and see lawyer and they think that I'm really serious, and I'm like, no. If you spend time with me, you know that I tell really bad jokes and I tell a lot of nasty jokes in among the guys on Thursday nights when I go out with friends. And I make a lot of jokes. I love making jokes in meetings and such where no one thinks I'm making a joke. And they're like, should I laugh or not? I'm not sure. What should I do? I enjoy that more than anything. So, and Tom, would you want to tell them what my plan is for my for my funeral?
Well, first off, he keeps wanting me to play Aqualung at his memorial service and then just announce it with anybody that really knew Dana would know he loved this song.
It meant a lot to him. And then play Aqualung, and those people who knew me would just bust out laughing. Everybody else is going to be going, oh my God, what's going on?
Now, to play the flute, fair, let me learn that part real quick.
Yeah, pull out the Ron Burgundy jazz flute there, too.
Yeah.
My flute's literally right under my desk. Okay.
The two songs that are much more fitting, though, to my dad and understanding certain family dynamics and jokes are, one, MacArthur Park, because it's a just strange-ass song, and two, Tiny Bubbles.
I had my wife going so bad because we were going to go on a cruise, and I got a download of it, and I kept playing it on the speakers for my iPod and practicing singing it. And she's like, "Well, it's karaoke night on the bar or in the bars in the ship. I'm going to do Tiny Bubbles." Oh my God! Don't do Tiny Bubbles.
You didn't do it?
No, I didn't.
I'm so disappointed.
The joke was the whole build up for them, and then you just don't do it. And they're like, karaoke comes up and you come up and I did do karaoke, but I did an Eagles song instead. And she's like, you didn't do Tiny Bubbles? Like, no, that song sucks.
That's great. That is all the questions that I have. Thank you.
All right.
For answering my questions.
Then let's
I'm
move.
like an onion. I have many layers and I make you cry.
Happy tears or sad tears?
That's up to you.
Well, many
Isn't
people
it better
have
like to say you're like a parfait? Because nobody dislikes parfaits. Parfaits have layers.
Oh, no, there are a lot of people who dislike me.
Yeah, people more liken him to ogres. Ogres are like onions.
No, I get the reference. Shrek the musical, they change it to parfaits instead of onions.
Everybody like parfait. Parfait, most beautiful thing in the whole damn world.
Sorry.
All right,
I'm gonna
I
be
suppose we
serious
should
now.
actually get started on what everybody's here for, and that's our revisit to the Stanley Rubric. So, if you have not been a part of any of our revisit episodes before, what are you doing? Why are you here? But no, please stay. Please stay. Anyway, this is a revisit where we skip the middle portion of our normal shows. We don't do best performances, scenes, or lines. Instead, we're re-looking at whether or not we got the scores originally right from our original episode. And again, I will draw your attention back to episode 51 if you want that. The link will be available in the show notes if you want to go to that before we get to our Stanley Rubric scoring. But we have our two guests here to judge whether we correctly scored in each of these categories. 12 Angry Men on our categories of legacy, impact and significance, novelty, classicness, rewatchability, and finally audience score, although we don't personally do that one. And so for legacy, just to define it or redefine it quickly for all of you out there, this is the 5 years after the film came out, so about roughly 1962 to modern day. So what is the legacy of this film, and as defined by both the industry and the audience at large? So we normally split this category into two sets of 5. Our original legacy score from the first episode, episode 51, was a 9.5. So, Dad, did we get this right?
We did not. The industry I still have at 5, but the public, the general public has kind of, there's a lot of people who have never seen the film. A lot of people have heard of it, but they've never seen it. They sometimes know what it's about and gist, or in the general gist of it. But so I went with a 3 for the public on legacy. So an 8 overall.
Throwing bombs early. Okay, this is great, because I have a feeling that you're trying to incorporate our office staff into whether or not people have seen this. And that's why I followed it up with how many people actually watch movies from our office. And the hands were about the same ones for the ones that had gone up. So we just have a movie divide between us and our audience of the office, or our office staff. And I'll just say, I think we need to retire that question from our staff meetings. If we're asking non-movie people whether they've seen certain movies or if they've heard of stuff, you know, even a casual viewer, I think, has seen this movie. Most people, if they say they've seen an old movie, it's this one or The Wizard of Oz. Those are like the two most common responses to the question I always ask. Somebody will tell me, oh, I love movies. Okay, what's the oldest movie you've seen? Let's see how much you actually love movies. Now, for me, it's 1915. I'll let you try and figure out which film that is. But either way, there are a lot of people that saw this in high school, that are familiar with the story, understand the references that are made necessarily. I wouldn't say that I have it anything less than a 10. The industry is a 5. I think that based on what I've recently introduced for my criteria of what on the audience side is a 5, if the normies, quote unquote, have seen it, I think it's probably close to a 5. And I think there are a lot of normies that are familiar with this movie. So I'm going to go a 10, and we can kind of settle in between there. Which of our guests would like to go next?
I'll go as kind of a bit of a counter to that, Tom, because we got into discussing on the previous episode. I was on the best years of our lives as to I think it was the indelibility conversation about like what is a 10, and if I look at like legacy and what is a 10, to me that has to be like a household name, like a name that is like the Michael Jordan of movies in in conversation. For instance, if you bring up Jurassic Park to anybody, they know it. If you bring up Back to the Future to anybody, they know. If you brought up Wizard of Oz, another one, even Casablanca, like those are the movies that like you don't have to say it's a movie. They know. And I think that 12 Angry Men falls just short of that. I think an 8 is too harsh. So I'm kind of like in between you guys. I actually thought that like as listening to the episode today, I would have gone in with a 9. You guys settled between a 9 and a 10 and 9.5. I think that's okay. So to me, I would either leave it where it's at or bring it down a 0.5 to a 9. It's absolutely a 5 from an industry standpoint. There's no denying that. So those were just my thoughts.
So are you going to sit at a 9 or a 9.5? We just need to know for when we start negotiating here.
I'm coming in at a 9.
Okay. So he's straddling the fence. Got it.
So I would actually say I think you got it right the first time with a 9.5. I totally agree. The legacy score industry-wise, I mean, its appearance on all of these AFI lists, it's second only to Kill a Mockingbird. In terms of the normal people, though, I have to advocate for that it's the play is taught in high schools. My high school teaches this play, and then invariably they're going to watch the movie. So it's still a entity, I think, in the real world. Now, we can get into lots and lots of arguments over the average citizen, but I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think that this is still something that is talked about continuously. I might actually teach it for the first time this year. I think it's still totally relevant for the average citizen, and I think 8 is way, way too low. I want to be like a 10, but I agree that 10 on at least on this level probably not, but I think you got it right the first time with 9.5.
So if I took the average of the 4 of us, which we do not do anymore on these revisit episodes, it would be a 9.13, just for the argument's sake. So I think the general consensus I'm getting is it has to at least be probably a 9 to get out of here. So Dad, let's hear your arguments exactly why you think it's closer to an 8, why we should all move towards you.
Well, I'll come up because you've made good points, but still, the problem I have is it's still, I have talked to people about it that I've run into, not just the office, and a lot of people who are not, I mean, are we talking about a legacy among cinemaphiles, or are we talking about a legacy among the public? And among cinemaphiles, it'd be a 10. But the general public, there's a lot of people that have just never seen the movie. And that's where I'm having a problem with the public.
So I think what we're haggling over is the sense of the casual film watcher, not the extreme people that have seen Casablanca and Citizen Kane and Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, all these old classics.
Or Intolerance.
We're talking about more the people who maybe grew up, in the mid 70s, and their experience with it is only the like Spielberg popcorn films, and then maybe you'll throw in a Back to the Future and some other stuff that's in there, but they're not going into the deep hardcore. They're not going to an Amadeus or an Out of Africa level deep.
But they know Gone with the Wind. If you said Gone with the Wind, they know Gone with the Wind. That's a household name. Even Citizen Kane is a household name. I don't know that the branding of 12 Angry Men is enough to be 10. Everybody's heard of it. Where everybody knows what Gone with the Wind is. Everyone knows what 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I would say 12 Angry Men is much more recognizable than 2001. The thing from 2001 that's memorable for everybody is that opening soliloquy of music.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I don't know how many people know Hell 9000.
Yeah, but the brand name though, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, people are going to know what that is. I think that's we're talking a 9 and a 9.5 here. I'm more likely to go up from a 9 to a 9.5 than anywhere below a 9 personally.
Okay, Dad.
I'm up at a 9.
would we be able to settle at a 9.25?
That makes
Okay.
me sad, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't think anybody's happy, but that means it's a good compromise.
I mean, in all, it's honestly where I'm probably at is a 9.25. You know, I think I am pretty happy actually.
Then impact and significance. This is probably the category I would guess is also going to be the lowest. It was originally on our first episode doing 12 Angry Men. It was a 6.5 at the time. And just, again, a recap or to define what impact and significance usually means in this context, it is the 5 years that we overlooked it in Legacy. This is now the initial 5 years after it came out. Did it have some type of path for its director, its actors, its technical crew that spurned on their careers? Did it have a big box office? Was it critically well received? Did it get awards attention? We originally came down at a 6.5, but for an opening salvo, Dad, what do you think? Did we get this right?
No, we didn't. It's too low. For the industry, because of the nominations and the critical acclaim, I have it as a 5. For the public, I went up to a 3.5 because of several factors. Number one, I did not take into account that this became kind of a big draw on television when they started rebroadcasting it. And that was within the 5-year period. Second, they hired a lot of actors who were Broadway performers, such as Robert Webber and Jack Klugman and Jack Warden. And that launched their careers. They not only landed bigger parts in Hollywood, but they landed bigger parts in theater and in television. Jack Klugman replaced Walter Matthau as the original Oscar Madison on Broadway. Went on to have a brilliant television career, both on the Odd Couple TV show and then Quincy. Jack Warden, was so prominent in multiple films as a character actor. Robert Webber had a long career, the Pink Panther films, working with Blake Edwards. I think one of his last films was S.O.B., and I can't remember. I think E.G. Marshall did not get into the Defenders television show until after this movie, and he got cast in that in the early 60s, and that was a huge television production. I also question whether Martin Balsam would have been in Psycho, but for this film. So, in fact, I might even be trying to convince myself that the 3.4 or 5 is too low, and it might be more like a 4. But I'll let our guests have a swing at it.
Well, but what's your overall score? What did you come down at?
Well, right now I'm at an 8.5.
Okay. Yeah, I can let one of you guys go. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is Sidney Lumet's first film. This film made the whole entire rest of his career possible. And he was an actor when he was a child. He's been widely regarded as an actor's director because he fundamentally understood what it meant to be an actor. You can tell that, I think, throughout the film. It's so well cast. His decisions as a director with these lingering close-ups on faces, it made everything else that he did possible. And he couldn't have done that if it wasn't successful. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, obviously. Didn't win any of them, but that's okay. But he alone was able to springboard his entire career off of this film, and was able to consistently make films that were highly, highly regarded. And then when you look at the cast, give me a break. It's everybody is fantastic in it. I know that Henry Fonda and Lee J. Cobb kind of get all of the attention, but I think that Jack Warden is, to me, I think one of the best actors in the entire film. He's magnetic and charismatic to me, and makes me want to watch him in other stuff, which he then goes on to do. So I think that I would say this would be closer to a 9, maybe a 9.5, but probably I would stick around a 9, because this movie made the director's career possible, because it is his very first film. And I think most directors would be lucky if they had this as their very, very first movie that they made.
Wonderfully said. And I'll just maybe throw on top of that too. I mean, Franklin Schaffner, who directed the original, goes on to win an Oscar for Patton. So maybe that put him on the map too. He was mostly doing television at the time. So all that's great. Now, Tom, I know you have kind of a running thing here where you say the guests compliment Dana and they don't praise you enough. So I'm going to do a little praising of you here, Tom, because I had a thing coming into this that I wanted to say. And I'm listening to the episode today, and you said it on the episode. And not just that, I listened to last week's episode, and you made a very similar point in that as well. And that's that this whole thing that the Academy got it wrong. How could they not give an Oscar to 12 Angry Men? Listen, Bridge on the River Kwai was the best picture. It was the best production of that year. It wasn't not going to be. Okay, that was David Lean's coming out party. A little courtroom drama, a play turned into a TV show, turned into a movie, is not going to win Best Picture that year. Now, listen, my list of favorite movies is 12 Angry Men higher than Bridge on the River Kwai? It is. But that doesn't mean that the Academy should have given him the award. It's a fool's errand to think that way. And you brought up the point with Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump's a perfect example. Anyone who lived it knew it was going to win. It was just going to win. It's just how it is. It was the best production of the year 1994. That's just how it was. Now, years later, you can revise how you look at things. But I don't think the fact that this didn't win Best Picture is any knock on the impact, as Dana said. I really kind of agree with all of Dana's points there. I think an 8.5 is about right, because I think the fact that it took a little long to get in, even if it was within the 5, that kind of steers me away from a 5 in the public a little bit. And this thing seemed to gain momentum as it went on. But Sara, you brought up really great points about the careers it made for all these people, most importantly, Lumet. So I'm kind of with Dana on the 8.5, but I can be convinced upward.
By the way, I just looked it up too. There was one I forgot, which is John Fiedler would not have been the voice of Piglet, probably without this. So, because he was cast to do the voice of Piglet in 1961.
And you did mention that on the original episode. That was your only remaining question. Why does Juror 2 sound so much like Piglet?
Because he is.
Well, I have the unenviable job of being the low man on this one.
No, I'm interested to hear the point for that, because I maybe I can be convinced downward.
Well, I will say that you've all convinced me from where I originally started from the industry side. I don't think I can make a good counter argument to having it less than a 5. There's just too many good arguments against it that you've already all made. So overwhelmingly, I'll just say a 5. So that automatically moves me up a little bit from where I even started. My issue would be, how do you really measure the public? This is a fairly poor box office film that kind of got lost in the shuffle. It actually did better internationally than it did in the United States originally. And to just somehow dismiss that it was on TV and therefore it got an audience later on, how is that quantifiable? Like, I don't know what the TV audience was. Was this a lot of people just tuning in for the first time? Did they all come to love it? Was it something that was repeatedly shown through the next couple of years? I mean, it's one thing when we said on the Shawshank episode that it didn't do well in its initial box office, but that's okay because the rentals and the cable numbers, like in the first 5 years, made up for its poor box office at the time. So all of that, I think, can't be glossed over. So I had a 2 because I'm not really sure where to come out on this. So if somebody has like a decent argument, I don't necessarily want to ding this movie. I just don't know where we can come down on this when it had such poor numbers.
I when you ask for it to be quantifiable, unfortunately, I don't have that. So I'm not that prepared for your show there, Tom. But I think there is the Shawshank effect there, as Dana was saying. It's that it doesn't have the initial hit in the box office, but then gains the word of mouth popularity because it's showing. And we also have the fact that it was originally an episode of a television show that then transformed into a more popular entity, into a 90-minute film, which then gains this kind of legacy from there. Now, I guess maybe you can now play, are we now taking points away from the industry and giving it to the public? How does that work? I think a below an 8 feels harsh. The original 6.5 is far too harsh, I think. So
I don't know. It's just hard on this category most of the time when there isn't a big box office to really give it points in that side of the category. But what I will say, I can compromise on the 8 from the standpoint if all of the things lined up, the amount of people that got additional work because they were a part of this movie, it had to be because there was at least some level of resonance with an audience or finding its audience at some point to give these people additional chances. So I'll settle at an 8.
So part of what I was thinking, a box office disappointment is really subjective. Furiosa just came out and everyone's saying it's a flop within the first 3 days of its release. And so I'm always really skeptical of box office numbers because it doesn't necessarily mean that the movie's good. You can have ticket sales to movies that are garbage, but looking at the way that it was regarded, not just at the Academy Awards, but it was nominated and won a whole bunch of awards in the UK. And the fact that it did find its footing once it was aired on television and was made available to a wider, more general audience, I think. So what I would ask is how many points are you taking away for it not being an outright box office bonanza, right? Is that worthy of, you got to knock it down 2 pegs or only 1 or half or whatever? Because I think all of the other items are in play to show that its impact and its significance are much higher beyond just money. Because again, Sidney Lumet would not be able to have a career if it was an absolute failure, which it wasn't.
I think you make excellent points. The one thing I would also add in is the box office reporting before the 70s is just, it's really tough to know.
Yeah.
Like, we kind of generally understand that Bridger and the River Kwai was the number 1 film of that year. But, okay, we got the rental numbers. That's not tickets sold. That's not, actual dollars. It's just the theater rented the film. And that's kind of what we have to establish box office. Okay.
Right.
So I don't know what the best tact for it is. I guess since Dad came up a bit on the last category, although I don't know. Okay, are you trying to get me into an 8.25?
I think an 8's fair. Personally, I think an 8's fair.
Okay.
All right, so we'll leave it at an 8 then. All right.
Fine.
The last one before the break here, our original Novelty score on this one was a 10. Novelty, I've recently experimented with doing a separated category, much like our first 2 categories, between originality, which I think for the most part this category has come to mean, but I've always added additional points for execution and excellence. Now, I will say that I am just a half step down from what our original score was. I'm currently at a 9.5, only from the standpoint that I don't think this is the most original movie. While we established in the original episode that we thought this was somewhat of a unicorn, given its point of view and focus from the jury perspective, which I don't think there are really any other films that do so. I think it's a highly executed film. I have no arguments on the execution side of it being a 5. So I'm at a 9.5.
I think it's time for me to be the bad guy now. Because, I think I'm going to be the low man here. I have this one at a 7, with kind of ultimately with your clause of excellence and execution, probably bringing it up to an 8. My main, where I'm really dinging it up is that this is a remake of an episode of a television show. And it's not an original script, an original entity. You even have some actors who were in that episode of the television show that are in the movie. So it is a lengthened, much, much better executed version of what the TV show was. I mean, you watch it and it looks like a TV show. The lack of charisma within a lot of the jurors there. There is a generic look to many of them. You got a couple of examples of star power, but that's about it. And then you bring in the incredible camera work, the deep focus, the changing the camera focus as you go throughout the thing to make it feel more claustrophobic and stuffier. So I think with all of that extra stuff, that you took this kind of like this standard just episode of a daytime TV show and then pulled it into this all-time great film, that needs to be accounted for also. And then all the other points you guys brought up with the subject material and whatnot. So I'm coming in at an 8.
So I actually have to concede, Kieran, you saying, oh yeah, this is an adaptation of an adaptation. And that, so in the sense of novelty or originality, may not actually be as high as we want it to be. It still, I think, stands alone, even as an adaptation. It's still pretty much the only movie told from the jury perspective. So therefore it gets really high marks. But I definitely have to say, oh yeah, this is still an adaptation. And it's built on the foundation of the original TV series. One of my things in terms of the excellence and execution, I hate the score. I hate the music that is in this film. It is hot to me. It is highly distracting. I hate it. Every time I've watched it, which is at this point, I don't know, probably more than a dozen times, it's distracting to me. I want it to not have any music at all. And there have been movies that have been well served not having any sort of musical cues. But to me, it is... Tom, I can't remember when you said this, that you actually really like emotional manipulation through music. And I'm more or less the same way, but also being a classically trained musician, it just irks me. There's nothing about the film score that I think helps. To me it's a hindrance and is a huge swipe against its excellence and execution score. However, everything else, the close-ups, the fact that you are watching these men literally sweat. I mean, maybe they're not literally sweating, right? Movie magic. But their clothes are starting to be stained with their sweat. All of that type of stuff, I think, is really impactful for the audience to create that sense of, as you said, Kieran, claustrophobia and tension. But also on the other side, one of the issues that I have is that in all of the discussions of the actual case itself, I have huge issues with the fact that they're told this is a murder in the first degree case. Is it a premeditated murder? And they never even discuss it. It is, did this kid commit the crime? Not, did he actually plan it out beforehand? And to me, that's a huge error in the script writing. And for me, that brings it down a notch. So for me, I would say probably around a 9 for me. So point off for each of those things.
So let me follow up on that one point here. Whether it's premeditated or not, would it have still been a murder charge in the first degree?
No, because that's first degree murder is premeditated.
But they didn't have to decide premeditation. That was the only instruction they were given. The only way premeditation came into account is if they gave a lesser included instruction, which is if you can't find that there's premeditation, then you could find second degree homicide or second degree murder or manslaughter. and that you have to ask for those instructions to be given, and then the jury has to decide that point. This becomes because you go for broke, which is, did he do it or didn't he do it? It's the only instruction they had, and premeditation wasn't necessary.
Okay, fair point.
I will say, for as many times as I've watched this, I've never really had a problem with the music until
I like the music.
2 days ago.
Makes me feel happy.
Well, for
I like it.
95% of the film, I don't have a problem. It's the final 2 minutes as they're walking out, it just feels a little over the head, like beating you over the head a little bit too much. When it kind of gets into its lighter moments and he's putting the jacket on Lee J. Cobb. We got to have a swelling score. Okay, do we really? I mean,
no, you don't.
The moment could really stand on itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets a little bit bombastic, but I'm not going to hold it against the movie. I think that's a minor point, all considered.
I agree that it's, it gets little points down, but the execution was really good. I mean, it was on the Westinghouse hour in 54. But you got to have points up. I mean, I watched it again the last time we did the show, and I learned that Lumet had actually started with a high camera angle looking down on the jurors as it was just Fonda holding out. And then as the jurors started flipping, he was at direct eye level when they were dead even. And then he's looking down up at them as it got to just the couple jurors holding out. I mean, the thought process and how well that worked and the impression that it made in the film when you actually pay attention to it was so phenomenal to me. It was a technique that I don't know why other directors don't use it for similar effect as they're showing changes in dynamics within a film. I went down a little, but I went with a 9.5 because even though it is a retread, it's unique as a retread.
I guess if I were to make an argument to try and bring you up, Kieran, the best one I could probably make is that despite being a retread, or any adaptation is going to have stuff that it is to itself. But does the level of execution make it exceptional comparatively to the original source material? Do we have such a high level of acting, screenwriting, direction, cinematography, production value comparative that it's like measuring night and day?
Well, they do add a good 40 minutes to it, and it's a healthy and effective 40 minutes. They add the whole glasses aspect of the dots on the side of the nose. It's just very briefly done in the original one, and then they just kind of move on. Then, now her eyesight's in question. She wore bifocals in court, but that's so they redeveloped that. They really helped the characterization of each of the jurors, and the basis was there, and they built off it. So and then everything Dana said with the camera work is there too. So I think this goes back to the box office discussion, is like, how much are you going to ding it up for being a remake of a television show? What is the number there? So I went basically from my 7 to an 8. Now, so Dana, you're at a 9.5. Tom, you were at a 9.5, and Sara, you were at a 9. What do you think is fair, Tom?
8.85.
I can do that. Yeah, I can't go over a 9. It's a remake.
I know.
It's a remake. I mean, it is what it is. But I'd sign up for an 8.85. That's fair.
I love it. I trade you well. Or pick a spot that's above the midpoint and hope they grab it. I love watching people follow my negotiation techniques.
I just got Duncaned.
I almost said an 8.9, but I thought I might be going a little too high.
I was waiting for 8.75, and then I'm going, is he going to hold out?
Slam Duncaned.
Okay. Well, to give us a second here to recuperate from that vicious negotiation, Let's take another break and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 200 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Also, you can follow each individual episode on our website as well. That has the notes for each individual episode with all of our scores, category nominations, and the individual factoids for each episode of this show. Just click the link in the episode description of this episode or go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote podcast to find that. Also, I would like to mention that we have now had 3 different successful episodes in full video available for you on YouTube. The Hangover, which we did about 4 weeks ago, Batman 89, and Forrest Gump. And I believe this episode will also be in video. So go over there and check that out if you want to see what we actually look like. Next up, I also wanted to just briefly talk to our guests. So Kieran, as a veteran of this particular program, what's going on over at BPC? What you guys got cooking up?
Yes, Best Picture Cast. We're in the heat of the summer over there. We're in our month of July. We're calling our Ernest Borgnine month. We're doing the 2 Ernest Borgnine Best Picture winners, Marty, which should be coming out the same week as this episode, and From Here to Eternity, starring the great Frank Sinatra. So those are our Best Picture winners coming up. We also have our On the Feed, our monthly On the Feeds, and we do some return series episodes too. We just returned to our original season. It's kind of in line thematically with what's going on here at this show. We went back to Shakespeare in Love from our first season, and I believe all 3 of you are lined up for future return series episodes. Sara, you're going to join us for A Broadway Melody. Dana, we have you lined up for Going My Way. And Tom, Rocky. You could put the boxing gloves on and go after Rocky with us. So
by the time I'd actually get on one, I have no idea what it will be, because I think this is the 3rd different one you've assigned me to during the course of the last year and a half.
I'm trying to move you up. The slot here so it happens sooner than later. But
if Tom doesn't want to do Rocky, I'll totally do Rocky.
I could do Rocky in my sleep. It takes almost no prep.
Awesome. Yeah, so that, and then we have our usual draft stuff coming up. So we have our sub 50 draft where we all pick movies under 50% of Rotten Tomatoes, and we put them up on social media for voting. And then we have our horror tournament, which is going to be sub 50 horror movies as well. We're going with all the stinky movies here this year. So lots of fun stuff going on at Best Picture Cast. Check us out.
And Sara, what is going on with Shea Cinema?
Yeah, so we are finishing up our 5th season. That doesn't mean we've been on for 5 years. That just means we've covered 5 years of the Academy Awards since we were watching all of the nominees for Best Picture. I've had some massive technical difficulties with our finale, so that is late, but it should be coming out soon. And then we're actually going to be taking a little bit of a break, probably until the fall. We've just got some stuff going on. But when we start up again, we'll be doing the 6th Academy Awards, where we've got even more movies than ever before. The first 3 years were just 5 movies a year, and then we started adding in bonus episodes. So for season 6, we're going to have a record number of 5 bonus episodes. Kieran is actually going to be one of our guests. So we're super excited to have our first celebrity guest on the show. That's going to be really exciting. We're also going to have Andrew Cornzon from Revisionist Almanac for an episode next season as well. I think I'm joining you all with Andrew for an episode after the beginning of the year.
Correct. You will be on the first episode of season 6 as we cover Barry Lyndon.
Oh, great film.
Oh yeah, Andrew fully talked me into it. Have you started reading the book, Thomas? We said we were going to do a book club.
So many things right now. It's impossible.
Yeah.
All right,
So it
I'll
would
get
be-
the Audible and listen to it in my travels between here and Madison.
Honestly, that's probably how I'm going to have to consume it as well, because I do not have time to actually hold a book in my hands. But I also am going to be on Revisionist Almanac in the spring, I think, covering the 1934 year of movies, which is going to be really fun. That's It Happened One Night. So I'm going to be doing a lot of things with other people, but we'll see how long it takes us to get season 6 started, because we're in a heavy wait right now time. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hanging out with more movie people and talking about films. It's pretty great. I've been waiting for forever to do Broadway Melody, by the way, Kieran. I know you move at a glacial pace, but
Yes. I think there was a year in between our Return to Crash and Return to Shakespeare in Love episodes. So, but I'm already cooking on Return to Chicago. Once I get Return to Chicago out of the way, it's clear sailing from there. So we're doing a lot over here.
What's going to be fun for season 6 is we have a number of musicals that we will be covering, which is going to just be delightful to compare. It's a wacky collection, like huge, disparate set of movies. Also, maybe the most pre-code movie ever.
Hopefully, Maurice Chevalier is in the mix for several of them.
You hush your mouth right now.
Thank heaven.
We cannot even afford our own accent.
That was actually a plot contrivance in one of his films, that they were like, how do we explain that he has a French accent and nobody else does? And they literally wrote it into the script that he made out with a French woman so hard that he acquired her French accent. True.
Thank heaven for Maurice Chevalier. What can we say?
Okay, so hold on. You're going to be covering in your season 6, I'm pretty sure that's the year of Cavalcade and
Woof.
all the things that supposedly lost to Cavalcade.
Woof.
Yes. Yes.
Oh boy.
This is the first year they went from, so 5th season we had 10 nominees. Now it's going up to 12, but we added 5 additional movies, and one of those movies is King Kong. So I'm really excited to do that one, as well as we're doing an extra episode on the very first zombie movie that was ever made as well. So
I will say, for everybody that hasn't seen the original King Kong from 1933, it actually holds up pretty well, all things considered. I think it's kind of an extraordinary thing that this almost 100-year-old movie is actually, pretty reasonable. Yes, you can tell that a lot of it's like claymation or whatever effects, but for the context of knowing that it was that old, it's actually a pretty decent movie, and it doesn't add all the like extra fluff that the Peter Jackson one that I just thought elongated it way too much.
Well, the crazy thing about King Kong and the practical effects that they did, some of that, we'll call it technology, some of that technology has been lost. People don't know how they made King Kong, honestly. They're like, the movie's old enough that nobody remembers how it was done and why does it look so good. And it's one of my favorite. I love monster movies, and it's probably because of King Kong, but those are the same people that made one of the very first films that was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, Chang, which was a silent film. And anyway, you'll just have to tune in to see what we say about it, because it's an incredible film, amazing legacy. I use it in school in my myth and folklore classes. Kids are like, oh, the CGI in the original King Kong isn't very good.
No.
And I'm like, they didn't have computers then, my loves. That's all real.
Yeah.
They got real dinosaurs.
So let's make the awkward transition. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Renaud White, 80, American model and actor, was in The Guiding Light. Martin Mull, 80, American actor, was in the movie Clue. and was in the TV show Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Danny Phantom. He was also in where I first saw him, which was a show called Fernwood Tonight that I loved. I thought it was hilarious. We'd watch it at 10 o'clock on reruns, and your mother kept saying how stupid it was. But what else is new?
I can't believe I allowed this to go on without saying one Gene Parmesan.
Robert Towne, 89. American screenwriter. Chinatown, The Last Detail, Shampoo, The Firm, Days of Thunder, Mission Impossible. Was thanked by Coppola at the Oscars for script doctoring The Godfather. In 2017, Vulture placed him number 3 on its list of 100 best screenwriters of all time. Only Billy Wilder and Joel and Ethan Coen ranked higher.
I mean, it's arguable between him and William Goldman, who had the bigger impact of the 70s.
Yeah.
But he made stuff like Days of Thunder, which is just Top Gun on the ground. Also one of my guilty pleasures.
Everybody needs a paycheck.
Yeah.
I love that movie. It's so stupid, and I love it. Also, it's got Boo Radley in it, so, you know.
Fair enough.
I got to shout out my boy Martin Mull, Colonel Mustard. Clue is one of my favorites. Just grew up on that movie. Colonel Mustard with the wrench. Let's go.
What's your favorite ending?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, it's got the third one with where they incorporate the whole deal. Yeah, that's the one for me. But I just recently got it on Blu-ray, and you can choose to watch it with a random ending, and it just ends the one way. Like it picks away, and then that's just the movie.
Oh, fun.
A cool little feature. So, yeah. But I'm a huge Tim Curry fan, so anything with Tim Curry and its works. But Martin Mull is outstanding as Colonel Mustard. He's one of the funnier characters in the movie.
So you're a big Muppet Treasure Island fan?
Of course I am. What kind of question is that?
So if you love Tim Curry,
that was my Muppet movie when I was like 6.
All the Muppets for me. All the Muppets for me.
What's your favorite Tim Curry movie?
I mean, it's probably Clue. Yeah, it's probably Clue. Yeah, but you know, I, of course, Pennywise. I can't, you know, I gotta shut up Pennywise. It's not that Tom Cruise movie where Tom Cruise is like a goat boy, or has a goat boy. Legend. That's tough. That's a tough one.
I don't really like that movie, but I love Tim Curry in it. I love him as Dark.
He's a lot.
Oh,
he's a lot. Got a shout out Home Alone 2. As the concierge, as the concierge. Oh, of course I do. And then what the hell? I like Congo also. So there's that.
All right.
Well, recipes Martin Mull, despite all that.
And so we remember these fondly for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. All right, thank you. We left off with our scoring, or our revised scoring, at Classicness. We originally had a 9.5. This is the most malleable category, and I have really no great way to define it other than, has this movie aged well? There are so many little ticks and things we've added over the years. The original score on this one was a 9.5, but Dad, this is normally your tee-up category. Did we get this right?
We did. I have no problem with our score. It addresses racism. The scene with Ed Begley going off and the whole jury getting, or the other guys getting up and turning their backs on him and not listening to him until E.G. Marshall finally tells him to shut up and sit down. The only point or thing I have to take off, and back then it was not that uncommon to have only 12 men on a jury instead of women. That would be the point, or the half point off.
Yeah,
go ahead, Kieran.
I have a hard time with, this is the category I have a little hard time with, and I really was going to just basically ask you that question, Dana, is that in the 50s were jurors usually just men? You know, I did a little brief research. It looked like the Supreme Court passed something in like the 70s that said it was that they, you know, that they couldn't not allow women on, and that's like, you know, I guess decades later. But so I just don't know a whole lot about it. It's hard to penalize the movie if it almost becomes a period piece at that time if they're doing it in the now. It does. Looking back, it's like, well, if they were to make it today, they definitely wouldn't make it 12 white men. But I lend to agree with Dana on this. Outside of any other information people have about what juries look like at that time.
Well, what they used to do to pick jurors is they used two databases, registered voters and property owners, and the property tax rolls. Well, I mean, especially in the 50s, a lot of homes were owned. There weren't even joint tenancy necessarily. The men owned the property, and a lot of women didn't even vote very often, especially in some rural areas. So, I mean, I don't think I have a big problem with it based on the time frame.
So you're at a 9.5 also?
I'm not disputing the original score.
Yeah, I think the original score is pretty spot on. I actually have no issue with it being 12 angry men and not 12 angry humans or whatever it is. It doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form. Even as a woman, I understand that it's 1957. That's the way things were. And I think a lot of the issues that are addressed are absolutely appropriate. It's not just racism, but there's classism and all of that type of stuff that is brought up, and then the varying degrees with which the jury members are successful or not, I think is done really, really well. So all of those things that as a modern audience we might start taking exception to, recognizing that it's 1957 and that's it. And I it doesn't take me out of the film going, why isn't this addressed, or why isn't this representation there, or anything like that. I might be able to be like, it should be a 10, but I'm totally fine with the original score.
I had debated maybe taking like a full point off on this one, kind of just to argue the sake of an argument. As I've often been the contrarian on this particular program.
But devil's advocate?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely got a timelessness factor to it, so I usually give it up a couple of points. I have nothing really to knock it for particularly. I would say that the one place where it hasn't aged well is just the faith of our general public in the justice system, as we've continued to become more complex. But is that really the fault of the film?
Mm-mm. And I think that's something to do with the modern audience, and not that has nothing to do with the film. It's not at the level of, say, like a Gone with the Wind, where how much do you need to separate things out in order to digest the film and be able to enjoy it. I think that if people are starting to get bogged down in all of those other things, they're missing the message of the film, because all of the important critical components are there just as it is. And if people can't see beyond that, that is literally user error.
Well said.
At least I see it that way.
So I'm perfectly fine at a 9.5, and that makes it a straight across the board. We'll just make 9.5 the official score of this category. All right. Rewatchability, I'll make mine simple. I made the exact same points I did on the original one. For me, how often am I to put this on of my own volition? 5. How often am I to leave it on if it's ever on TV or TCM or flipping through a channel? 5. I have a 10.
I'll go. I mean, I talked earlier about like 10s have to be defined as something, and there are a handful of ultimate rewatchables, and the Back to the Futures of the world. For me, the Shawshank Redemptions of the world. This is a slam dunk, easiest category I've ever been involved on. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. So rewatchable. So I could throw it on once a month, no problem. This is the easiest category I've ever had on my guesting on the show. It's a 10.
I have to agree. This is a 10. I've watched it 6 times within the last few days, let alone over the last month and years, decades. It's not like a comfort movie for me like Jaws is, but there's something new for me to look at and to take in every single time. I appreciate new things all of the time, even as I start coming up with more and more nitpicks. And I think that I'm a better person for having watched it over and over and over and over and over and over again. So 100% agree. 10 out of 10 every single time. It's not Cimarron.
Oh, God.
Nothing is Cimarron.
Oh, that is not watchable.
It's not even watchable once. Forget about the re part.
Maybe after 35 years and 150 jury trials, it's getting to the point where maybe not having this on the regular rewatch circuit is the best idea anymore, but I'll leave it at a 10 since everybody else is there.
Good man.
Good.
Maybe it's just I'm having a crisis of middle age.
Well, we'd like to critique that we really did a poor job on the first episode, but to be fair, and Kieran messaged me about it, and I'm always reticent to go back and listen to myself on an episode that I basically have not thought about in 3 years. It was a decent episode. I thought we did a decent job. I thought the analysis was fairly good. I thought I made some actually decent points, which is a rarity for me to give myself such a break.
How's your third eye that you grew? How's that going?
It's still as strong as ever.
I like that.
It's probably more focused than any of my regular eyes.
The podcast eye. Yeah, that was good. No, it's a great episode, and you guys crushed it back then. It was I guess like your season 2 premiere, so you could tell you were up for the occasion. I really enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, when we started season 2, I distinctly remember I let each of us pick a film. I picked this one. He picked Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Great one as well.
Yep. Yeah, no, I have to give you kudos for the original episode because, I mean, you really went deep into it and talked about all of the things that are important, and clearly it's a movie that all of us hold in high regard, but I think that automatically it should have a 10 because we've all seen it dozens and dozens and dozens of times, right? And we wouldn't stand for it if we didn't want to put it on more than once.
Dad, do you want to help me with the math on this category?
10?
Thank you.
Chipper Jones.
All right. Then we have audience score. Originally, when we did the first episode, we were only incorporating Rotten Tomatoes users. They're still at a 97. However, the Google users, those are the people we need to bring out the pitchforks and torches for. They're at a 91.
Not the Google users.
So unfortunately, it has dragged it down ever so slightly to a 9.4. So to repeat the categories, for Legacy, we went from a 9.5 to a 9.25. For Impact and Significance, we went from a 6.5 to an 8. From Novelty, we went from a 10 to an 8.85. For Classicness, we went from a 9.5 to a 9.5. Rewatchability, we went from a 10 to a 10. And for audience score, we went from a 9.7 to a 9.4. The original score on this one, and it is currently sitting as our number 3 film, was a 55.7. Our new total score will be a straight 55. So it dropped 0.7 points. And that means it drops 1 spot on the list behind North by Northwest, but yet still ahead of Casablanca.
Your precious Dark Knight lives to fight another day there, Tom.
At least until the revisit of Jaws. All right. So remaining questions for this one. Did the jury reach the correct verdict? Most professors in law school would say no.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the world of the movie, to me, yes. If we're going to like transform this into reality, I don't know. I'll let Dana take this one.
I don't know. I can't answer the question. It's you do the best you can, and the juries are supposed to do the best they can. I don't necessarily have a fault with the verdict.
I don't personally either, based on how it's presented within the course of the movie. I think it's reasonable to anticipate that this is the normal course of events with the evidence. But then again, I don't look at things like a prosecutor, like other people might. So I'm willing to allow for argument against that, of course, being, I guess, the future lawyer or lawyer in training, if you will. I would say, though, if they didn't reach that particular verdict, they've at least established incompetence of counsel for appeal.
I agree with Kieran saying, like, within the world of the movie, I think they did reach the right verdict. But once I start trying to apply, I guess, real world modern sentimentality, probably not. They do very explicitly say, if we have a mistrial, so for a hung jury, then he's just going to get retried and convicted by a different jury, right? So if we don't come to a conclusion, another jury is definitely going to convict him and have him executed. So, because that's always been one of my questions, well, why not just be fine with it being essentially mistrial? But again, within the world of the movie, that just is not, they're not okay with that outcome, right? And so I have to say, yes, even though I have still tons and tons of questions about all of that. And you had mentioned in the original episode, Justice Sotomayor essentially saying this isn't how juries should work, and the circumstantial evidence component, and Henry Fonda bringing in this extra knife, like, what the heck? That's just so wrong. But it works as a storytelling tool. So yeah, they did. I'm glad I wasn't on this jury, though.
Fair enough. Remaining questions for any of you?
I have one I'm going to ask right off the bat. Why was the bathroom bigger than the jury room?
Hays code, right? They couldn't actually show them going to the bathroom, but they needed somewhere else for them to go, and they can't show them going to the bathroom, so therefore they're just going to show them splashing water on their faces a whole heck of a lot.
Yes. I love the bathroom scenes in that film, by the way. It's the great bathroom scenes.
I have a similar question. Would the whole thing be moot if the building had air conditioning like God intended?
12 comfortable men.
They wouldn't have been as anxious to get going. That's part of it. I had a judge once, Judge Dahlberg, who used to always say, "You never feed the jury until they've been out at least past 7 o'clock, because otherwise they'll take forever."
I have one. I think that's a fun one. If you were one of the 12, what would have been the moment or the piece of evidence, revelation throughout the movie that would have made you turn? So basically, when in the process would you have turned, assuming you weren't, for the sake of this, you weren't Mr. Fonda? Or would you still be there to this day, arguing, no, he did it? Where would you have been? So what was the moment that you would have been like, I changed my vote to not guilty?
For me, it is 100% when Joseph Sweeney, the old man, starts talking about the old man as a witness, and then he's noticed it. Well, that's about halfway, I think. But when he starts talking about the older man and saying, I noticed that his clothes are worn, and he is maybe not telling the truth, not maliciously, but because he's convinced himself that he knows all of these things because he has a need to feel important. And everyone's shouting at him, what do you mean this guy's doing it just for attention? And he says, no, it is truly, this man is lost and not being regarded as a full human. And so that to me is actually, I think, the most powerful scene in the film for me as an audience member, because there's a compassion that is going on there that isn't necessarily part of the, oh, now we have another knife, and oh, how long does it take the L train to go by the window? Can you hear people screaming? Is he running out of bed? All of those types of things. It's a character study, and that to me, again, that's me being emotionally a softie. But to me, that's the scene or the moment that stands out the most to me, because it's based on human perception and not just, I have all of these other things to bring into question and let's reenact the murder and that type of stuff.
Cool.
For me, I would have probably been Henry Fonda, simply because I can't or hate witness testimony. I think it is so unreliable. I would have been questioning if they wouldn't have come in with some sort of forensic evidence tying him to the murder. I would have been questioning the whole trial.
So since you couldn't pick Fonda, then we're making you the old man. Then you're the old man that votes
probably
votes
because
not guilty. On
I would be full of doubt because, again, like I said, I've seen too many, just absolutely ridiculous, identifications.
In the mix.
Whole thing where you have the witness identify the defendant. Well, yeah, he's the guy sitting next to the lawyers at the other table. It's not the prosecutor. Like, duh.
Tom?
I am my father's son.
Yeah, you're doing the same thing. You would have been not guilty from the start. Okay.
Somewhere between Sweeney and Klugman.
And Klugman gets under shot because he's number 3 in this. He gets he's the one that really gets the momentum going. For me, it was always the usage of the switchblade that turned me. The fact
towards
that
the end when they're talking about the different nights,
about how an experienced user would not come over the top, because that always felt like a frame job to me. It would be like, oh, he has a knife like this, I'm going to use the knife, but it's like, but he wouldn't have used it that way. That's how someone who doesn't normally use the knife would use the knife. And the reason they use this knife is because they knew that he had a knife like that. So that's the part that always kind of turned me. I realize it's a little problematic, but because maybe like in a crime of passion, he just had to get it in one blow and he could do it that way. So I don't know that in a court of law that holds up fully, but just in my relationship with this film, that was always kind of the moment where I'm like, ooh, maybe he did not do this.
Well, the one that really set me off more than anything else, other than my own doubts, is when they pointed out that not only did he ran from the scene, but still apparently had time to wipe the knife.
That's a good one too. That one
was the one that just floored me, because there are no fingerprints. Yeah, because you're running out of the place, but you stop long enough to wipe the dumb thing down.
Yeah, cool.
I have an additional question. Have any of us ever served on a jury or even been summoned?
I got brought into the grander room, where I actually saw the person being, the defendant. So it was probably me and maybe like 40 other people. So I was in the small room, but then they initially asked that, does anybody have to travel for their job? And I raised my hand and I was gone. So, that was when I was in my early 20s. I have not been called upon since, but that's the closest I came to it. But I was actually in the courtroom with the personnel, but that's the closest I came to it.
Was it criminal or civil?
It was criminal. Oh, it was very criminal. Yeah.
Very.
Violent crime. Yeah.
Got it. How about you, Tom?
Unfortunately, no. As much as I wanted to in my younger life, I was never summoned, even though I've been a registered voter since I think shortly after I turned 18. And I guess maybe I just wasn't a property owner, something like that. But nope, never been summoned. And unfortunately, I don't think I would ever be asked to have been on a jury. I would have been kicked the moment they asked, "What do your parents do?"
Dana, have you ever had an opportunity to serve on a jury before you became an attorney?
No, I've been summoned 3 times. Twice after I moved.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved from Beloit, Rock County. They summoned me after I moved. I said, I'm not a Rock County resident anymore. So I got struck. Then I was in Juneau County. They summoned me after we moved to Wisconsin Rapids, which is Wood County from Juneau County. And I said I didn't move. I got summoned a 3rd time up here. I called up my friend, the Judge Zappin, said, would you like to deal with this ahead of time and save me a trip in? And so he called the 2 lawyers and said, what do you think the chances are that you'll let Dana sit on your jury? And they agreed, both. The first time they had agreed, slim and none.
Right.
So he excused me without having to come in. Now, interestingly, my daughter, Sara, who was our guest last week, did get called in and got called to jury and went through voir dire.
Oh.
And when asked what your parents did for work, she said, my dad is a lawyer. And the defense attorney said, well, has your dad talked about lawyers very much? And she said, and this is her statement was, well, my dad thinks most trial lawyers don't know what they're doing. She got struck.
Yeah, of course. So back when I was living up in Washington State, I got called, gosh, I want to say it felt like once a year almost. They were just really hankering to have me on. Early on, I was excused because my husband at the time literally was a TV news producer. And so his job made it so that I could not serve on a jury. And then later on it became, would anybody experience a hardship if they had to serve on a jury? And then as a teacher, I would have to miss so much school and have to do so much work in order to not be there. Even though I'm legally protected, nobody wanted to give me time off to actually do jury stuff. So I got excused every single time, like six different times. Since I've moved to Nevada, nobody wants me, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I was booked for plane rides, so that alone was enough to get me off. So they're not going to make me cancel flights.
I think I have one last one. What do you think the plot of The Amazing Mrs. Bainbridge is?
Is it confirmed that that's not a movie?
I didn't find it anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny in the Friedkin remake, he uses the Mike Lee movie Secrets and Lies. Is the film in that, but he calls it Lies and Secrets. And then someone in the back goes, it's actually Secrets and Lies, and he couldn't name the people in it. I'm like, I don't know that he needs to name the greater cast of Secrets and Lies. He's not like doing an introduction segment for Gmote,
Tom and I were talking about this question last night, and I was like, my first thought was it would be something like Mrs. Miniver. And Tom, what did you say?
I thought it was going to be closer to like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in my mind, even though they're completely different. But Maisel takes place in the 50s, or I guess maybe the early 60s. So I don't know. I have this comedic element to me in my head as to what I would imagine the thing to be.
Yeah, and they said the other movie was like a whodunit. Was it The Red Circle? It was a lovely like little whodunit, and then he said, "Well, what was the second feature?" Right, knowing that every movie it's a double feature, and he says, "Oh, it was a what does he say? Is it cheap or doesn't have a big budget or
low budget?
Whatever, low budget, and it's got this dark, beautiful thing." And I was like, "Well, maybe it's like a really bad MGM musical, The Amazing Mrs. Bainbridge, and it's I don't know, some over the top, ridiculous but low budget."
Starring Maurice Chevalier.
Oh no!
He would have remembered Maurice, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he would have. Oh boy.
Okay. We have no listener questions, so I will just simply thank our guests for being with us this week. We appreciated having you both. Kieran, you are set to be back on the next time for our revisit of The Shawshank Redemption.
Look at how this goes. Just falling like dominoes here. I love it. I love it. Coming for you, The Dark Knight.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
No, if I didn't get it on this one, I don't think I'll get it. But hey, I was very fair. I was very fair. I always am when I enter the rubric zone.
And Sara, thank you for being on for your first time. Just a reminder that 5 times gets you your hat. You will next be with us for the aforementioned Barry Lyndon episode to kick off season 6. So we have that to look forward to. But
I am so looking forward to that, and I really, truly thank you for having me on today for a fun discussion about a serious movie. Actually.
No.
But quickly before we go, Kieran, where can everybody find you and your work?
Yes, everything is at Best Picture Cast. That's where you're going to find the podcast, Best Picture Cast. We're on all the socials. We're on all the platforms. Come check us out. We interact and all that. And as Tom said, I'll be back on G-Mode again. But I will also be back in spooky season for Saw. So that I've had that marked on my calendar. Saw, G-Mode. This is incredible. And I expect on that episode, I want to hear what Ronnie Duncan would say about Saw. What would be the 4 words, the 4-word sum up of that movie? So you guys have a little work to do between now and then for that segment.
Oh, I am looking forward to that episode.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be like a half an hour just to start of me reacting to seeing the film for the first time.
Oh, you've never
As
seen
a
it?
I haven't either.
I'm not a horror.
He doesn't.
film
He's scared of
person.
horror movies. So, but I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I may be wrong, but I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I don't think it's going to be as wild as you're expecting. But maybe
It's
I
not
don't
as gross out as you might think. Who knows? I remember seeing it in the theater and was just like, "Whoa, this is amazing!" And then it wasn't too long after that like Hostel came out, and I was like, "No, thank you, I'm out."
Yeah,
and I stopped watching horror movies
there's
for
a line
while.
between those two for me too. Yeah, I would agree.
And Sara, where can everyone find your work?
So the show is Shea Cinema. That's SHEA. I used to be able to say it's like Shea Stadium in New York, but that doesn't even exist anymore. So
Nope.
R.I.P. Shea Stadium. Love Shea Stadium.
Yeah. So Shea Cinema. I'm on Instagram at Shea Cinema. Very rarely on X because I don't know how to do social media at all because I'm an old lady. But that's pretty much it. Like I already said, I'll be appearing on your show as well as Rev Almanac, and we're gonna have Kieran on soon. So yeah.
You need your own hidden Scooby-Doo villain.
No one needs that. No one needs that.
All right. Dad, any final thoughts for the week?
No, not really.
I guess this is technically our 4th of July episode, so it's always great to do a kind of democracy and justice podcast in an uncertain amount of time where I don't know if we will have a democracy in the near future. But for a while we have it. Thank you, and celebrate what we do have as long as we have it. So that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Next week, for our 219th episode, we welcome back returning guest Jesse Sertle of Cinemadison to discuss the film that started the counterculture of the new Hollywood for its 55th anniversary, Easy Rider from 1969. Directed and written by Dennis Hopper, with Peter Fonda and Terry Southern, starring Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, and Jack Nicholson. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you.
That's RELGOOD.
Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at the new RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.